Thank you for watching Now You See TV. This is your host, John Pounders. And if you're listening live, you have a treat for you. And if you were listening to this broadcast after the fact, it's a great show. And we're really happy to have Mark Sargent today. He is from enclosedworld.com. And if you check out his channel, he has a lot of stuff that you can see, the videos, interviews, his transcripts, and just amazing things that will have you just kind of wondering and questioning your global Earth theory. And so to me it's really crazy because, like, you know, my whole life I'm growing up with this globe, and I see it, and it's just neat to me, the whole NASA idea. But as I started seeing people question it, like we had Rob Skiba on. I think it was about a month ago, maybe something like that. And he started talking about this stuff. And when he first started questioning, I was like, Rob, what are you doing, man? You're getting ready to lose it, you know? And then I started seeing what he was talking about, and I was like, this does kind of make sense. And the fact that nobody has been able to debunk a lot of these things really have me thinking. And I'm still not 100% sold on the idea. I'm kind of the person that has to see it for myself type person, but it's just such an interesting topic. And I got an email today that was somebody telling me that, you know, you have guests on here and you don't ever put them to the test on stuff. And I just want to let you guys know that's not my job, okay? I come here to interview people so that they can tell us about their information. If I was going to have a debate, we'd have a debate on it, and we'd make sure it's that. I don't bring guests on here to corner them on any way. People were telling me I should stay away from Rob Skiba, stay away from a lot of these people. But you know what? These people are my friends. These people are people that I respect highly. And so, you know, it's easy to just say, you know, these people were this or that. And a lot of times you hear from bad information, such as somebody like, and, you know, I don't like to put people's names out there a lot, but Michael Hoggard is really irritating me lately. He's putting out a lot of fake information out about the Hebrew Roots movement, about a lot of different people. So if you listen to that guy, I'm sorry if I'm isolating part of my audience, but he's lying about a lot of the things he says. So I want to make sure you guys get that clear. And I'm sorry, that's just the truth of the matter. And I want to get that out there so I don't get 100 different emails of people telling me that this about this person, this about this person. Worry about your walk, and if you don't receive the information that you hear tonight or any other show, that's fine. We're not here to force anything down your throat. We're here to get the information out so that people can hear it. And tonight I have my co-host John Hall with me. John, why don't you say hi and tell people about the conference coming up next weekend?
What's up, everybody? I was looking forward to today's show with Mark Sargent. We were excited in the house. We have a lot of questions for him today. But getting back to the May 7th, May 8th conference in Evansville, Indiana, we've got Rob Skiba, Vigilant Christian, Gary Wayne, and David Carrico. It's a treat. Please come by, check them out. You'll be edified by what they got to say. They're hardcore researchers, biblical scholars, and they won't steer you wrong. So come out, check it out. You'll get a lunch the first day, or is it the second day, John?
They'll get a lunch on the first day, because on the first day it is Shabbat, is Sabbath. So we don't want people to have to worry about trying to buy their food or anything like that. We'll have the food there supplied so that they can eat when they get there, and we'll have food that way they can kind of, you know, have finger foods throughout the day and stuff until later on that night. And so it'll be actually at a coffee shop where we're doing the thing. There's a venue inside of there, so there's also going to be, you know, a coffee shop available for treats later on and stuff like that. So they can go to nowuctv.org and register there. You can find John on Facebook, me on Facebook, John and Patricia Hall, and find out for the information there. Tuesday, we've got Doug Hamp coming back for the Awakening. He's going to be doing Why I Left the Pre-Trib Rapture. It's going to be a great show. Hopefully a lot of people will show up and ask a lot of questions. Yeah, it'll be interesting, to say the least. I'm still not sold on the pre-trib, post-trib, or any of that stuff. So for me, it's going to be interesting to hear. We're trying to host a pre-trib debate as well later on in June, and I think we got some people lined up for that, because I'm the kind of person that's like, I have to hear it and really just I just haven't heard any real good evidence for either one yet. So I'm interested in hearing what Doug has to say. I have the utmost respect for Doug, and even though we may not agree on everything that we teach, I still have the utmost respect for him. So we're looking forward to that for sure. Also, make sure when you guys come to the conference, it's going to be right downtown. So we're talking about, tons of restaurants all around. For those of you that like to play penny slots, which I'm not condoning, so don't be, they have a casino down the road. They have there's a lot of cool stuff to do in the downtown area. So, but we're really looking forward to meeting you guys and getting the chance to just talk to you. And we're going to have question and answer segments from Gary Wayne, Rob Skiba, David Carrico, Vigilant Christian, and it's just going to be an amazing time, and I'm super looking forward to it. I can't. Sorry, somebody's calling me out here.
It's a chance for like-minded people to get together. Speaking of like-minded people, there was some flat Earth mixers going on, it looks like last week, and I was trying to follow it. I was going to bring Mark on and see if he couldn't talk about those flat Earth mixers that were happening. I saw that Patricia Steer was doing one. I saw that you ended up going to a few. What was that like?
That was amazing. And hi, guys. Thanks very much for having me, by the way.
Thank
you. The mixers were being held. Initially, it was Patricia's idea. She started the first one she was going to do down in Houston. And then another flat earther named Robin Poe had called me, and she goes, hey, since you're up in Seattle, maybe we should do one up in Seattle at the same time, because we were doing it on Earth Day. So we reclaimed it and called it Flat Earth Day. And so I put an invitation out there, and honestly, I didn't know how much response I'd get, because I called the restaurant up. I said, what, book a table for 8 and let's see what happens. And then the RSVPs just started rolling in, and before we knew it, we capped the room out at 30, and I couldn't take anymore. We're turning people away. Patricia had 20 down in Houston at her thing at an Italian restaurant, and then another group in Los Angeles last minute kind of did a group of 8 down in Los Angeles. But it was absolutely fantastic. It put faces to a lot of the names that I've been getting, over the months. And more than that, though, it solidified to a lot of people, which was why we started rolling out videos, that this is no joke. It's and there's a lot of people saying, are there people in my area? I get those emails all the time. Are there people in my area that I can meet with? And once we showed that, yeah, there's absolutely people out there, it was incredible to watch. We had, just for mine in Seattle, we had 2 people come down from Canada, several from Oregon, several from Idaho, one from San Francisco, and that was just, because we said, hey, we're going to meet up, and wasn't anything formal, just meet up in a seafood restaurant down in Seattle. And quite a few people flew in for this. It was fantastic.
Well, it's like getting like-minded people together. I mean, that's awesome. A lot of people out there that are doing the research are isolated, and they don't get to communicate with one another personally. So I guess it made it more favorable to see somebody face to face and be able to sit down, coffee, and discuss these things.
Yeah, it gave a certain concreteness to it, where it materialized. People were like, for a lot of people, it's still ethereal, because if you don't have anyone to talk about it with, a lot of people are really shy about talking to their families about it. What happens? And when you got there, when you see, it's like, hey, there's real people. I mean, the energy in the room was just incredible, and it just lasted all. We were supposed to start at 6, and there were people there way before 5. There were people there before I got there waiting. We ran until like 9:30. We were basically some of the last people in the restaurant, and did a little after party afterwards. It was great. It just never stopped. I don't think I slept 15 minutes that entire night.
Very cool, man. I bet that was interesting. And I'm surprised as me how many flat earthers there are, man. I was blown away, man. When I heard about it, I was so just tripped out by the idea of it, and like I look, and like we did a show with Rob about it. There was like 20,000 people that viewed it, and I'm like, are there really that many people interested? But now that I look at it, it's just so amazing. And if you would, Mark, just tell us a little bit about the stuff that you do right now, and then we'll get into like some actual questions about the stuff. So
sure. I won't go into the prehistory of how I necessarily got into flat Earth, but because I know it's a limited amount of time I got. But I created a series of videos February of 2015 called Flat Earth Clues, which basically proposed that everybody here is living inside a Truman Show enclosed structure. And I just kind of put it to everybody. It was kind of a challenge to the internet. I made a series of videos called Flat Earth Clues, ran it, the introduction and then 12 clues, and I said, tell me how I'm wrong. And I laid it out. I go, here's why I think we are not living on a globe. Here is why I think we are living in really what amounts to a building or a God structure, an enclosed system. And which is why I called the website enclosedworld.com. And I put it out there. didn't really think it was going to resonate much, to be honest, because I thought I missed something. I mean, yeah, I had done a bunch of research beforehand, and I thought I had all my ducks in a row, put it out there, and then just held my breath and waited. And the emails and the phone calls just started coming in and coming in. And within the first month, I was doing interviews. And within another month after that, I had my own radio show. And my book just came out at the beginning of March this year. And it's just been crazy. The numbers and how things have been resonating, all the weird stuff that's been happening, even in mainstream. I mean, we just watched a few months ago the world's most prominent physicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, get into a rap battle with a Grammy-nominated rapper over the flat Earth. How does this even, it was getting surreal even for me, and I had been in this for a while. So that's what I started doing, and now just to give you kind of a note on where the numbers are coming from, if you typed in flat Earth into YouTube, just that term, no quotes or anything, back in the beginning of 2015, yeah, maybe you get 40, 50,000 hits, maybe, 50,000 relevant searches. You do the same thing now, you're about 5.5 million, which is 10,000% increase in a little over a year. It's crazy the amount of resonance. And anyone who does a flat Earth video, Marty Leeds joked about that just recently, where he's going, because you want to jump into YouTube and get some hits quick. He goes, build something flat Earth into it. It's amazingly hot. He did it real quick. He did a video. His biggest video up until he did a flat Earth video took him 3 years to get 100,000 hits. He puts out a flat Earth video. He gets 200,000 hits in a month, and just that fast. So it's been amazing to watch, even for someone who's been in it as long as I am, which has not been long.
It's really cool. John, go ahead. I saw you're going to retire. Let me plug the chat room real quick. People are starting to trickle in. If you guys want to go to the chat, we got a few people in there right now. If you go to the description in the video, if you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching on Google Hangouts, go to the description and you guys can come and view the chat and speak to us and be available to ask questions later. So you go ahead, John.
Well, I was going to ask him if he had any projects coming up in his research over the flat Earth. Is there anything new that you're going to be out doing?
What I've been focusing on mostly, and people that know me have been kind of following the Strange World show. The Strange World show initially was talking to flat earthers and then going over various flat Earth related topics, but then the subject matter experts started coming to me. I didn't have to solicit a single one. They all started calling me because I put it out there. I said, look, in one of my clues, I said, look, it's going to take a whistleblower at some level before we get this thing going. If anyone wants to talk about this, anyone wants to confirm this, please give me a call. And the United States military people that have been calling me have been fantastic. Just to rattle off the subject matter experts I've done only in the last 6 months. U.S. Navy missile instructor, Air Force navigator, Marine Corps sniper instructor, Navy submarine chief, Army artillery radar officer, Australian intelligence officer, American flight instructor, industrial engineer, career surveyor, international shipping expert, career travel agent, air traffic controller, United States Army master gunner, aviation ground training combat expert, that's Army, USDA surveyor, a 32nd degree Mason, which I just did last week, and the one a couple days ago was an etheric science researcher. All these guys have come forward and they all say the same thing, which they say, look, there's something wrong. Whatever you think the world is, it is not that. It is something else. Now, they all would pretty much say, look, we don't know exactly what shape as far as the flatness goes, but they say, we can tell you for sure, though, it is not a globe. It is not moving. And everything that the science books are telling you are dead wrong. They're hiding the biggest thing ever.
I think it's interesting, too, like when a sniper shoots a gun, okay, when they shoot a gun,
yep,
there's something, I think it's called the Coriolis effect. I may be wrong.
No, you got it.
But they have to plan for that. But for some reason, planes don't have to, and that doesn't make any sense to me. What do you think about that?
I can elaborate on that because you will find some YouTube videos where they say, oh yeah, we will compensate for the Coriolis effect, and people don't know what the Coriolis effect means. That means the Earth's spinning. So you have to supposedly account for the Earth's spin, because if the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, if you're firing a bullet, the theory is that bullet is going to be affected because it's not going to be, the gravity's not going to have that much of a hold on it. You're going to have to adjust for that. And yet I've got I read a statement that was given to me by a Marine Corps sniper instructor who had trained for 3 years. He goes, look, it's not in the manual. And everybody else, and that was just, you're shooting, the snipers are out maybe a mile, maybe. I know a lot about ballistics. And so it was great for me because I had artillery guys that were firing at 30 miles, tank guys that weren't firing that long, missile guys that were firing at 60 plus miles. They all said the same thing. They say, it doesn't matter what you're firing, the Coriolis effect is not put into the firing solution. And your point, John, about planes, that's a brilliant point, and that is a plane is just really just a slow-moving projectile. I mean, it's slower than a bullet, but not that much slower than a bullet. So why doesn't it have to account? Why isn't the runway kind of shifting underneath it as it's coming in for a landing? And that never, ever happens. And I've talked to 3 different pilots on air about it. American flight instructor, the aviation and ground trading combat expert, and the Air Force navigator, and they all said the same thing. They said, look, the pilots don't know. Everyone's too busy. They all know. When they go up there, they see the flat plane. All the gauges say it's all perfectly flat, but the last thing in your mind is, well, it can't be actually flat, right? I mean, it's got to curve eventually. We just can't see it. Right. And so when someone will say, well, aren't all the pilots in on it? And they all said the same thing and say, no, none of the pilots are in on it because they never would have thought of it. Everyone missed it. Because why would you ever think that? It's the dumbest thing.
Can you imagine a pilot saying to another pilot, "I think the Earth is flat"?
Oh yeah,
he would get laughed out of he'd get laughed out of the bar.
If you could, even if you were so open-minded as a pilot and you made that massive leap of faith, yeah, who are you gonna tell? Your buddy, the FAA, your employer? You're done. Which is why I joked in one of the clues. I said you would be better off telling them you had been chased down for 2 hours by a giant UFO. That would actually be easier to digest.
One thing I wondered is because if the flat Earth model that I see, I noticed the flight patterns was odd because I was trying to figure out ways that a normal person can test it. Somebody that has a pilot's license, whatever. A flight from South America straight over to South Africa.
Yep.
You don't find flights that you can get that are straight over, even though it seems to be a really short pattern. The flights you get go all the way up into Europe and then back around. Why is that? Because I mean, obviously, if the Earth is flat, I can see why, because that's a way longer distance than they give it credit for. Because that should be a one.
It should be. Everything, what you just said there, that's how I got into it. That was the intriguing little nugget that stuck in my head, because this German guy was saying, he goes, look, he wasn't even really a flat earther. He was just saying, look, there's something wrong with the flight routes in the southern hemisphere. If you're flying anywhere from South America to Australia or Africa, basically anything below the equator to anything below the equator, he goes, the routes are all wrong. They're all screwed up. He goes, they all go north and they go into weird directions. He's going, if you're flying from Rio de Janeiro to Sydney, why are you going through San Francisco or Dallas or Los Angeles? Why are you going up there? And it's like, pick up people? No, it's pounds of fuel. That's the rule of the airline industry. But if you take it and put it on a flat map, it all lines up perfectly. And then when I was looking at that, and so yeah, what was interesting was about that was, and I made a video called the long haul, which I said, look, it's very, very hard to find nonstops in the southern hemisphere. You could say like Sydney to Rio, right? And you'd get maybe 50 flights, but 49 of them are going to be connections, and they're weird connections. They take 30, 40 hours to do, which it shouldn't be, it should be only a 12-hour flight. And then people are coming back and they're going, yeah, but there is one nonstop. And they kept hitting me with this one It's like, well, that one nonstop obviously blows flat Earth out of the water. I was going, does it? So then I started staring at it, and that's when I found out that the GPS system doesn't even work when it goes over water. That really blew me away. It took me several days because I'm stubborn and somewhat of an idiot. And so I'm watching these planes blink. They're blinking off the screen when I'm going to get a drink or a sandwich, and I'm coming back and I was going, where'd the plane go? So I'd follow another plane, and they just keep blinking off. And then I realized that the GPS system, it's not just in the southern hemisphere either, which I didn't talk about in the clues. It's also in the northern hemisphere. So when you fly to Hawaii, if you're going like, as soon as you leave the California coast, you get about 150, 200 miles off, gone. That plane does not exist anymore. Oh, the graphic might be there. The graphic will show up, but if you click on the details in any of the programs, Flight Aware, Flight Tracker, Flight Radar 24, the latitude and longitude will go to approximated or estimated mode. And my complaint was, and there's different stories. There's different people who try to explain it, saying it's like, well, if the GPS system has 32, 36 satellites that are flying all over this place, and it was designed by the Department of Defense, there should be blanket coverage. We don't do anything in the U.S. small. There should be blanket coverage everywhere. And not only is there not blanket coverage, there's these massive gaps which conveniently are in any large sections over water. It's amazing.
500 years of we're on a sphere. What are your thoughts on why such a huge conspiracy? Why hide this?
Why would we hide it, or why would the creator hide it?
Well, not the creator, but why would government powers? We got a question like
before you get into that, I got one more question about the flight thing. What's the website? I can't remember what it was because I went there as well. The website where you can track every flight. What is that website again?
Take your pick. There's FlightAware, Flight Tracker, Plane Finder is a good one. That's the one I usually use. Planefinder.net. But you can, they all pipe into the same system, which is the United States DoD system that went online supposedly in 1995, which in reality is probably just the old Loran system with a different sticker on it, which is ground radar based. They just said, it's like, oh no, we've got satellites tracking it now. It's like, ooh, I don't think so. Anyway, to your question, John. Why would you hide it? There's several reasons. The first one would be that if you don't hide it, what I've learned about the authority, the people that run this place, not God, I'm talking about just man, the governments, the royals. I call them the authority, but it's really a group of the super rich, the royals, and government groups. If there's a risk of instability in our civilization, even if 10% of the population freaked out about this and grabbed torches and pitchforks and started running through the streets burning things down, they're not going to do it. Think of the obvious things first. Look at academia. I'll cover these real quick. There's 3 things you got to look at. Academia, you are going to lose the entire educational system from grade school all the way through college would be an upheaval. There are certain departments that wouldn't even exist anymore, astrophysics, astronomy, and then anything that ends in an ology, geology, hydrology, archaeology, biology, those things have to be retooled to the next model, to a new model. So the academic world is in chaos. The second one is financial. There would be a massive upheaval financially in the world because there's too many questions. Stock market freaks out if a president gets assassinated in another country. Imagine if all of a sudden the world was like, oh yeah, by the way, the world isn't round anymore. It would be financial chaos. But the biggest one would be spiritual, which is, think of this, every religion in the world, the big 5, which control 80% of the population in this world, be it Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and of course Christianity, every one of those groups has been looking for a holy grail, a magical artifact that solidifies their religion, whether it be the literal holy grail or the Ark of the Covenant, the Spear of Destiny, or whatever you want. If all of a sudden you were told that we were actually built, and by that built, this place was created, and if there's created as creator, well, then you've got basically the handprint of God potentially sitting right out there on the edge, and that's a tough pill to swallow, especially for science. Science does not like God questions. They don't. We've seen it with evolution. We've seen it with the Big Bang. If all of a sudden science has to come in, and it's unfortunate because they were the ones that discovered this, in my opinion, back in the late 50s. If science finds something that goes against science, they are not going to tell you. Plain and simple. The Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark argument, which is, everyone was fighting the entire movie over the Ark of the Covenant. What happens when you get to the last minute of the movie? They put it in a crate and they put it in a warehouse, and no one ever gets to see it because it goes against science. It raises questions which science doesn't know how to answer. You take those 3 things, educational, financial, and spiritual. You put, and put that to a group of guys, high-powered guys in a meeting room. That meeting takes about 10 minutes tops. And they said, we got to hold on to this thing for as long as we can. So what's it going to take to hide it? Money. That's all it's going to take. Money and being clever. Do not tell that many people. Seal off the outer edge and the upper edge. And they did it very, very well. Their big moves, everything got so weird after the 1950s. The Antarctic Treaty in 1959, locking down Antarctica for all time. Creating inventing the Van Allen radiation belts and saying that they're up there. Creating NASA in 1958. which basically militarized space and kept the private corporations out for decades. And only now are they even coming, anywhere close to it. And I'm sure those private corporations, SpaceX and Virgin Galactic, they're probably tied in at this point. But it is, it's the greatest deception of all time. It's the coolest deception of all time, and it's a wonder to see. I learn new stuff every week.
Talk about the Ponzi scheme behind NASA. You know what I mean? They billions of dollars dumped into this.
Oh, yeah, 20 billion last year was their budget. Yeah, and they keep kicking the can down the road. We're paying 20 billion for things, but they're killing programs. Most people don't even know we don't even have a space shuttle program anymore. That's gone. They keep talking about Mars. No one's been to the moon supposedly since 1972. That's 2 generations of people that have no idea. There's nobody's. They keep talking about Mars, the Orion project. Keep kicking that can down the road. That's never ever going to happen. And I talked about this in several things where you can't. Unfortunately, the detection ability, and I don't want to nerd this conversation too much, but we all, if you make a movie, you're going to make mistakes because every movie is filmed out of sequence, which is why the news for the most part isn't. But we get into that later. So if you have websites that are dedicated to it, if you make a mistake in your movie, it will be on the internet. It's called moviemistakes.com or the other clones of that. You couldn't fake a Mars mission now if you wanted to, because the detection ability of the internet, they would just dissect it and they would discover it in record time, which is why they're stalling as long as they have. It's like, oh yeah, we'll get to Mars. That's what you keep hearing. We'll go to Mars. We're going to Mars. Everybody get the money together. We're going to Mars. They're not going anywhere. They can't. If I was given, and I'm a pretty creative guy, if I was given a dump truck full of money and the best Hollywood people in the world, I would still say no. It's like, there's no way you can do it. You can't fake anything anymore, which is why all the local stuff, we don't have to get into those, is so hard to fake because the technology is caught up. Between HD and everybody with their phones and the internet, everybody's swapping stuff and all the forums. All it takes is one guy in the middle of Kansas, 4 o'clock in the morning, to spot one frame, and then that's it. It's on the internet, and you're doomed. Sorry, that's my rant.
YouTube is blown up with debunking NASA. I mean, it's all over.
Oh, yeah.
Rob had a short video out. He was talking about the Van Allen belts, and a lady talking about doing water suits and how much they were going to cost. And I mean, he was just going off on a rant on that, and just people started making videos just on that one subject. I mean, you can find out how much money they're going to spend on it, and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just debunking it left and right. So
I love watching what you said there, because the flat Earth movement, what it's done is it's taken a whole nother level of people, and they're going backwards and they're analyzing every frame that NASA's ever released, and now they're just ripping stuff apart. We even every week we get stuff from like 6 and 7 years ago, and they're saying, well, look at this. They'll find it, and it's blatant. They're horrible effects, and I feel bad because they used to be able to get away with it, and now they're not. It's especially the interior ISS stuff. It's just horrible production. I would, if I was in a Hollywood backlot and I got, that was my dailies watching the interior ISS shot, oh, the heads would roll. Pretty bad.
There's several questions in the chat, but I'm gonna hold those just for a second, guys. And if I forget to ask them, re-ask the question, copy your question, because I want to ask it. Okay, so we're talking about planets, we're talking about Mars, we're talking about stars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how does this work into the flat Earth plan? And I've seen a couple different flat Earth models where the sun kind of goes in a round circle around, like a circular pattern around the Earth, which I can understand that. But what about the stars and these planets that are, how far away are they? What is going on, man? The orbit pattern and all that. How does that change if the Earth is flat?
If it's flat, what it does is it really doesn't change it that much as far as how it moves through the sky. What really changes is the distance. So, and I know I'm going to date myself by saying this, look, to really appreciate, you got to go to a planetarium just to see what I'm talking about. If anyone doesn't know what a planetarium is, I don't know if they take kids there anymore, but it's a giant dome structure where you lay on your back in these seats and you watch all the stars and everything go across the sky. And the moon, if it's a really good planetarium, maybe they'll throw in the sun, but it's all pre-programmed and everything just moves across the sky. And what I'm getting at is, The stars are moving, not you. So the question is, and some people have said, well, I've seen Jupiter and I've seen Mars with a telescope. And I go, fine, take your pair of binoculars, go into a planetarium, look at Jupiter, and tell me, do the binoculars make it seem more real or less real? And it's a trick question. It's like, well, it doesn't make a difference because you're in a planetarium, it's fake. Then I propose, it's like, okay, how do you know you're not in a much, much bigger one? Because, and that was really what I proposed, which was if you can make a structure, basically it's a giant planetarium / terrarium / arboretum / wildlife preserve, whatever. But if you can make something that's thousands of miles wide and several thousand miles high, can you fool an entire civilization to think they're actually, in space? And yeah, you can. How far are the stars? If the dome could be as little as 400 miles high and several thousand miles high. What makes it different, though, in my opinion, is the most of it is planetarium-like. Like we would build a planetarium, but the sun and the moon appear to be different. They appear to be solid objects, whether they're two-dimensional or three-dimensional, we don't know. But they are roughly about the same size, several thousand miles up, maybe 3,000 miles up, and they're both between 30 and 40 miles wide, and they're both completely illuminated, self-illuminated. The moon isn't reflecting anything off the sun. One is a big light bulb, the other is a big night light. And they're spinning around, and they are suspended by something that a technology we don't know. Does this mean the stars aren't real? No, I mean, they're lights in the skies. Do they have sentience? Do they have conscience? I don't know, but they're not what you think they are. They're definitely not light years or even light minutes away. They're right there.
So you think they're inside of the firmament? They're not.
I do. I'll go scriptural on that one, and I can't remember chapter and verse. Rob Skiba would be way better than me. Where that the stars were placed in the firmament would not surprise me. I mean, even that's probably an interpretation. I mean, if you ask somebody from olden times, go into a planetarium and you turn on the projector, and you see the stars up there, technically they're in the dome, but they're actually on the dome as well. It's hard to describe. But another thing, because people will say, well, that's hard to do. That's really, really hard, and they can't get their head around it. I was going, look, I'm old enough to remember when you used to go into planetarium on the weekends and watch Laser Pink Floyd or Laser Zeppelin, where basically used the same system but turned off all the stars and projected all this weird stuff that's up there. If people forget, it's like, no, they were using the same system. You could project anything you wanted. So when people say, well, how do you get a crescent shape on the moon? How do you get the phases of the moon? Are you kidding? You can do anything up there you want. I mean, blood moon, that's easy. Just turn moon red. At this particular time, it's not hard. The upper part is a snap compared to what's down here. The tough part that is everything on the ground. Those systems are way more complex than what's up there. Up there is just a light show.
Well, talking about the laser light show, I've been seeing a lot of on YouTube about dual suns, two suns. Have you looked into that at all?
Yeah. I mean, that kind of ties into the whole Enoch thing, which I never, when this thing first started, beginning of 2015, I never would have thought that the Book of Enoch would have risen to such prominence, but it really has. Those who don't know what the Book of Enoch is, it's a non-canonized book of the Bible, which is very, very interesting and really is kind of a blueprint for how the world works. Basically, getting down to, the sun, how the sun would come in and out of portals, and the moon would come in and out of portals, and then you get that question: okay, is there more than one sun? Is there more than one object going around? Because if you're doing a display system and you want to simulate, the stars spinning in one direction and stars spinning in another direction, you're going to have two sets of stars, plain and simple. Which is what we've been doing in software for at least the last 15 years. When we create simulations, it's called instancing, which is you create a view based on your region. So if you're in Texas, you see, the belt of Orion is made out of green stars. Up here in Seattle, they could be made out of red stars. What I'm saying is it's easy to do because you just say, if Texas, green, if in Seattle, red, if that's how I did that. But anyway, yeah, the multiple sun thing, yeah, very possible. There's some weird stuff up. There's a lot in the sky that we're still trying to figure out.
Now, what about these pictures that people were, because they have big telescopes now that are, massive telescopes. Okay, yep. And there's an obvious distance difference between stars, at least from what and of course I haven't tested this, and maybe you have, but it seems to be an obvious distance between certain stars and other stars, and there seems to be cluster stars and different things like that. What does your research say on this stuff?
Well, when it comes to stars, there's a couple things. I'll go both pro and con. When it comes to the stars, I believe the stars are also not only they projected up there, but I think they're projected in layers, much like in fact, I'll use something that I read off one of my show things recently, which it appears to have resolution that is tied to depth. So if you're zooming, again, the tough part is I don't want to give NASA too much credit, because the people that take those really, really deep pictures, it all circles back to the same group, which is tied to NASA. Even NASA will tell you that the wonderful pictures that you get of all the galaxies and all the fun nebulas and all that stuff, they will say, oh no, it's translated from black and white data, which was translated from a radio telescope, which is translated from all this other stuff. I do not believe, I'm not trying to be necessarily harsh, but NASA is my enemy at this point, that NASA, the only reason NASA was created was to help hide the world you're in, and that everything they have done, everything from 1958 until now, has been absolutely made up. It's just been a joke. But to that end, let me mention one other thing here, because this will tie in with the stars. Something that people have been bringing up recently, which is the lack of parallax scrolling when it comes to stars. So that, like you said, if there's close stars and there's far away stars, and we are traveling, our galaxy is traveling through the cosmos at 500,000 miles an hour or even faster, or millions of miles an hour, eventually, sooner or later, you're going to get parallax scrolling, which means, like you're driving by in a car, the telephone poles right next to you are moving really, really fast, but the mountains in the distance are moving really, really slow. None of the stars are shifting. None of the stars are moving. They're not ever getting out of perspective. And people saying, well, the distances are so far that that's never, ever going to happen. I'm going, I don't know if I buy that, because the constellations are still there from thousands of years ago. The whatever constellation you're going to think of, that constellation pattern hasn't changed. It's still, the drawings are still there, which means no parallax scrolling has ever happened.
That's one thing that I've heard said before, is that Orion's belt, when it lines up with the pyramids, that there's a certain amount of degrees it's off now compared to how it used to be. But I don't know. Have you researched that any or not?
I have not. Everybody that I've talked to or watched or read has said the same thing, and they're saying there's no real evidence of any parallax, because it should be everywhere simultaneously. Right. I mean, if you got a star that's 12 light years away and one that's 500 light years away, and those aren't, that's a pretty big distance, even though they're fairly close, you're gonna see something eventually. People keep forgetting that, yeah, the Earth spins at 1,000 miles an hour, and it goes around the sun at 60,000 miles an hour, and then our solar system's flying through, I can't remember if it was 500,000 miles an hour, but then our galaxy is supposedly also moving as well. You're gonna see shifting. And you don't do it. I think it's a limit of the system. I think that between our lifespan and our being distracted by everything else that's down there, we just never noticed. Like anybody that's noticed. Even the surveyor that I talked to, career surveyor, 2 different surveyors I talked to. The one, 32 years, he's been shooting long tracts of land, and he said the same thing. He goes, everybody missed it. Everybody missed it. He goes, there's 2 types of surveyors. There's geodetic surveyors and there's plane surveyors. Plane surveyors are told, and that's 90% of all the surveyors that are out there, are told that the world, he goes, treat every project like the world is perfectly flat, right? But they think only that far. It's like, well, okay, the project is perfectly flat, but the world's not flat. The problem is, if all the projects are flat, then when does the curve come into play? And he's going, it never came in, ever. And we were talking big 10, 20 mile square tracts of land. The analogy I give is, look, if you try to cover a basketball with some wheat thins, those little square crackers, eventually you're going to run into gaps. He goes, the gaps were never, ever there. Ever there. And he goes, but that's because everyone missed it because they weren't looking for it.
Wow. And then you got the canal, like is it the Arizona Canal?
How about the Suez Canal?
Yeah, I mean, that's multiple miles. I think the longest one in the world, though, is actually the one in Arizona, the Arizona Canal Path. But I would wonder if the people that were built would actually have had to plan for that. If that was the case,
if it was a curve, it would. Right. Look at the Roman. Look at something simple. Look at the Roman aqueducts. They were piping in water from all over the place. They had, what curvature formula were they using? They weren't using a curvature formula, and yet, because eventually that project should have failed. They would have gotten to the point, it's like, hey, the water's not going anymore. Why not? They would have never figured that out, and never comes into play. Not even some of the people that I didn't even interview. Patricia Steer interviewed Brian Mullen, who does balls out physics. He's a structural engineer, full-blown structural engineer, and he's come right out and said, no. He goes, the projects that we're building do not account for curvature. Doesn't happen. And you combine a structural engineer with a plane surveyor and all the other guys, nobody's contradicting each other. That's the other thing. Not only have I interviewed all these people, and they've come out not shy in any way, shape, or form, using their real name in most cases, nobody's come out against them. I have yet to get a military guy. How hard is that to come online and said, it's like, you know what, your Air Force guy is completely wrong, and here's why. Your Navy guy's completely off his rocker, here's why. Yeah, you'll get stuff in the comments. People will say stuff, but no one will actually come out officially and say it. And scientists are running away from us in droves. We've contacted at one point or another just about every major physicist in the United States. No one will talk about it. They can't, because if they do, no one wants to be that guy. You're going to come on and lose. There's questions they can't answer. They know. We send them the questions. Like, here's 20 questions. Answer all of them. If he can't answer even just 5 of them, he's stuck.
If somebody could come on and just make a simple debunk video like that, okay, I saw a video and I'm not sure exactly, I can't remember if it was Gons or somebody that did it, but they had a laser that went across a lake or a body of water and there was no drop, and after several miles, people could easily just go out and debunk that if it was debunkable. I'm telling people, because if you can do that, go do it, because you'll get a viral video right off the bat if you just start debunking some of this stuff. But nobody's done it yet, so it makes me wonder.
No, and every time they try, it gets worse. Initially we had problems with the ship going over the horizon thing, because there was this pirate ship that kept, it wasn't the best quality in the world, but it showed the boat supposedly, where it was going down hole first. But the problem was, for every one of those, we've got another 5 or 10 videos that, with what's really amazing over the last 5 years is camera zoom technology, especially I think the Canon P900 or whatever it is, which just amazing zoom. And so you see a ship with your eyes go over the horizon, and then you put the zoom on your camera and you can bring it back. And then you don't even go full power. You let it go away again and you can bring it back. That's not possible if the curvature is there. And I had a geodetic surveyor who said in a video recently, and he was so frustrated because he knew full well he had problems. He's going because it's 60 miles away. That should be several thousand feet below the curve, over the hill. You should not be able to see the Statue of Liberty from 60 miles away. He goes, fine. So you can see the Statue of Liberty from 60 miles away. So what? Who cares? It's like, what are you talking about? Who cares? He shouldn't be able to see it. And he had no answer for it.
Shouldn't be able to see it at all. And one thing that I'm going to try, I'm going to be in Florida next month sometime, and my wife has a lens that's like, I know you can't see both my hands, but it's super long. It's a long lens because she's a photographer. Yeah. And I'm going to rent a boat and have them go out as far as they can go and clock on the GPS how far they're going and see how far I can zoom into it, just to do a test of my own, because it's interesting, man. I mean, the thing in the Chicago across
Lake Michigan.
Yeah, that right there, it blows my mind right there. It blows my
mind. That was one of our early ones, and initially it started out as a still shot because somebody had taken a picture from 52 miles and from the other side of the lake, and you shouldn't be able to see the entire Chicago skyline. There were people saying there was a mirage. Well, then I think it was the same guy actually shot time lapse. And he's not a flat earther. He just shot time lapse of the Chicago skyline from the other edge of the lake. It was like 12, 15 hours. It covered multiple weather. It was light, and then it turned dark, and you could see the lights. There was no wavering. There was no inversion. You were just seeing the entire skyline. You should not have been able to see it. And people, it's like, you want to call a single picture a mirage? Fine. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Last time I checked, though, time lapses for mirages, they don't last that long. Not even close. And I
felt bad for that weatherman trying to explain it away as a mirage. It was the worst. I mean, it went viral. It was the worst I've ever heard, and the best mirage I've ever seen on film. But that hurt watching him.
For me, that was a real treat was the Navy guy that came out. The Sparrow missile instructor, a clever kid. He comes out because if you try to throw him out, for being crazy, it's even a better story than if you leave him in. But he was using 2-inch beam radar at 60 miles, painting ship to ship, and ships aren't that tall. 60 miles, that's several thousand feet. He goes, we hit every time. He goes, we're not bouncing off the ionosphere. It is straight shot. And then some people say, well, the Earth's going to grab, the gravity is going to bend the beam. I'm really going to grab it perfectly at 60 miles? What about 50 or 40? It's always going to grab it perfectly? Don't give me that. It's plus he was seeing thermal. He was using some advanced thermal infrared binoculars, and he's going, look, infrared doesn't lie. He's going, I could see ships at 30 miles. Show me a mirage where the thermal imaging is correct. It was amazing. He started the wave of it, which was great.
Sooner or later, scientists are going to have to come out and deal with the flat Earth subject.
Yeah.
It's just blowing up. And like you said, you had over 5 million hits?
Oh, no, not just 5 million. It's 5 million relevant videos. I mean, it's blowing up on just sheer number of people that are coming out, because once you get that aha moment, you get so pumped up. It's amazing seeing people make their first videos. People's never done videos before. Just create a YouTube channel. It's like, I want to talk about flat Earth. I keep looking. They have 10 subscribers. And it's just amazing. Yeah, it's blown up.
Sooner or later, they're going to have to come out and deal with this.
Well, they tried with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Right.
They tried a couple months ago, and it was so surreal watching it. But at the same time, doing it as long as I have, I still think there's an ulterior motive here. I think they want it to come out eventually. I think there's a secondary play here.
Well, I want to go on to the chat because there's questions just on there. I want to.
While you get that question together, yeah, I think you're right about the idea behind them wanting to come out, because I think that it plays into the whole alien deception that we've talked about on so many shows. It plays right into that, and that's exactly why they want it to come out. And when they do, it's going to be a ground shaker, because if you look at the way things are going, there's going to be it's going to be crazy. It's not just like, okay, the truth can come out, everything's going to be okay. It's going to cause a lot of problems, major problems.
Yep. Yeah, you have to do it with something else. You can't just do it by, I've said this for months, which is flat Earth is not a standalone situation. You have to combine it with something. It's the left jab before the right hook. The question is, what's the right hook? Is it somebody going to land in the middle of somewhere and say, oh, we're here, we built it? Or, is it a false second coming? Oh, you can take your pick, but there's a right hook coming. Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I really think that's what it's playing into, because you've got people like popular rappers and people coming out and saying stuff about it that and talking about all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's a matter of time, and I really do think that if it is true, I think that they want it to come out because they want it to come out in a way that
they want to control it.
Yeah, they want to control how it comes out. So anyway, Go ahead, John. So.
No, that's a good point. I was just thinking about when you said that. Who went to the Pope? When was it? I saw you.
Leonardo DiCaprio, who just won his first Oscar.
Yeah, mainstream media is. I mean, you hear little excerpts here and there.
Yeah. Where Rob Skiba was the first one to really latch onto that, where Leonardo DiCaprio, I showed him the video where he goes to the Pope to talk about climate change and gives him a book with a painting where he said that there's a dome structure where the Earth was flat and it used to be hung up above his crib. And then the Pope, he travels to Cuba to meet with the somebody down in Cuba, whoever the Catholic version of he is down in Cuba. That guy then goes to Antarctica for whatever reason we don't know to hang out at this little church down there, the only church in Antarctica. All these just weird things. Yeah. Sorry. Uh-oh, can't hear you.
No, sorry about that. Somebody was typing saying I look mad. I'm not mad. I promise. I had a.
He doesn't look mad.
I don't. I'm not mad at all. I have my son. He's 2 years old, and I went to the zoo today and walking up these hills, so my back is absolutely killing me. So I'm not mad by any means. Just to let you guys know. So.
Okay.
Anyways, talking about Antarctica, there's a question in the chat by Chad. He says, what does Mark know about the UN treaty that all countries have signed saying they will not go to the Antarctica? That's off limits?
Antarctica is, let me clarify here because I tried to be as clear as I could in the clues, which was if you want to spend $15,000 and go down to Antarctica and take pictures of the penguins, you can go. However, if you have a company, and I don't care what company you own, you cannot do business. Your corporation cannot go to Antarctica ever. And I mean that which is weird because it is universally signed. It doesn't matter if you are a small mineral company or the biggest oil production company in the world. Not only can you not go down there, oil companies from Russia can't go down there. China cannot go down. Nobody can go down there ever. Not only they can't go down there, they can't even talk about going down there. So you'd think if I was, again, the head of ExxonMobil and wanted to go down there, all I have to do is call up the New York Times, pay them a bunch of money, and say, hey, I want to run a story every week saying how great it would be for my company to go down to Antarctica. It'd be great for America. You can't even do that. You can't lobby. You can't even go to, you know how it works, money and power and greed. It's everywhere. And you can lobby Congress. You can lobby the Senate. You can't even talk about it. It's crazy.
Well,
but yeah, sorry, go ahead. Oh, your mic cut out.
Your mic cut out, John. I think you might have muted it on accident.
No. I was listening to you and Rob on one of your shows that you guys were talking about that the Pope and an Archbishop got together and then he went down to the Antarctica and he couldn't vet that story that he went down there and did some ritual. Has anything else come out of that?
No one's going to hear about that. They took the pictures of him standing next to the penguins and going into that tiny church. I have no idea why that thing was there. But the other half of that story that that a big Soviet crew or a Soviet blockade of ships supposedly carrying an ark. Now I'm not saying it was the Ark of the Covenant. It could have been a different ark, but yeah, there was all sorts of weird stuff tied to it. I believe some of it. There's some stories that just they're not going to tell us. They're not going to get leaked out for whatever reason. But we do know he went down there after the Pope had talked to him, after Leonardo DiCaprio had talked to the Pope. I mean, yeah, you could say, oh, you're just connecting the dots. I'm going, there's some pretty weird dots to connect, but they all happened.
Well, Chad come up with another question. I'm just going to start throwing them at you real quick.
Sure.
What do you know about Operation Fishbowl and Operation High Jump? All math would collapse as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, Operation High Jump was first. That was in 1946. That was Admiral Byrd's biggest military mission where he goes down to Antarctica with a full carrier fleet looking for something. Now, what people say, well, was he fighting the Nazis? Or did they run into UFOs? It's like, yeah, maybe. But he did take a full-blown carrier group. What exactly happened is still shrouded in mystery. But hang on, I have to close. You probably hear some noise in the background. Give me 1 second. Right back.
Yeah, no problem, man. This is interesting, man. I just say
sorry about that, guys.
No problem.
Sorry. Okay, so he goes down there in 1946. It was a leaf blower. It was outside, so it was just gonna get worse before it got better. So he goes down there, and whatever happened down there in 1946, I don't think was that big a deal because by 1954, when he goes on the Longines Chronoscope show, that CBS show, it didn't seem to be a factor. So whatever happened in 1946, they took care of it. Now, did they rout the Nazis and whatever happened, or did they scare the Nazis into it, into asking for asylum with whoever's running the place? It's possible. Whatever happened, it didn't make any difference in the long run because by 1954, when he went on television, he didn't seem to really care. He was like, oh, no, we're just going to go down there and make money. Operation Fishbowl, completely different thing. That was part of the atomic weapons program testing, high altitude nuclear. I got to remember, I don't say nuclear testing, which started in 1958. And in 1962, between the United States and the Soviet Union, where they were basically taking atomic weapons and just firing them straight up for 4 years, just pounding. I mean, those first shots were not small. 3 megatons was considered a very big shot in the 1950s. And part of one of the packages on the United States side, the Russians don't have clever names like we do. One of the packages on the United States side was called Operation Fishbowl. Weird name to put on a rocket testing program that's going straight up and blowing up atomic weapons. It was really, really strange. The one I don't think was necessarily a big deal. If the Germans did go down there, they never resurfaced. The only time they resurfaced was in the movie Iron Sky, which was a few years ago. As far as the atomic weapons program testing, that was going straight up for 4 years. That went 4 years, and then the Soviet Union and the United States stopped on exactly the same day. They had several other packages while they were doing it as well. Fishbowl was probably the most interesting. And they, in my opinion, they had taken it to the limit. They had hit that sucker, and that's typical of what we would do, right? You know, you find a dome, it's like, let's punch through it. What do we got? Wham! And atomic weapons weren't going to help. So then I think they were trying over the last 5 decades, trying different things. I think HARP initially was designed to be a frequency issue where maybe they could kind of phase shift it, maybe. And then now we have CERN. And CERN, I think, is the biggest, boldest, which is okay. Maybe we can't do it with brute force. Maybe we can just open a door, sci-fi style, and just get out without actually having to deal with the dome itself.
I'm going to be interviewing a guy named help me out here. He did the book Shinar Directive.
Dr. Michael Lake.
Michael Lake, and he talks about one of the spots that they built Babylon. He believes that there was like a loose point or a weak point in he doesn't talk about the firmament because I'm pretty sure he doesn't believe in flat Earth, but he's talking about into another realm, and maybe that could have something to do with it there. That's pretty interesting to think about, and that's not something I'll probably bring up to him because I'm pretty sure he doesn't believe in flat Earth. But when he started talking about that, when you guys started talking about Operation Fishbowl trying to bust out, that's one of the first things. If I had the money, I would test. I would go straight up as hard and fast.
Hit that thing with everything you got.
Yeah. There's a guy we follow, Anthony Patch, on, and we watch his stuff on CERN, and we've noticed we downloaded the earthquake app, and you just get all the earthquakes that they report. And over the last, I'd say, 6 weeks, just yesterday I counted from midnight all the way up until about 9 last night was like 58 earthquakes, with maybe 6 or 7 of them being over 5.0 and more.
Yeah.
Does that play out in flat Earth as far as
everything that's all right? Let's see if I can put this in a certain way, because I have caught some flack because I've said, look, if we are in a giant terrarium / planetarium, whatever, everything is artificial, and I know it's tough for people to let go of all the other things. And I say, look, if you're going to have a little terrarium with a spider in it, a tarantula, is anything that you do in that terrarium, is anything you do you're going to leave it to chance? So yeah, you're going to have a light bulb for them and maybe a night light at night, and you're going to have a nice glass cage and some stuff on the bottom. Are you really going to put anything, you're going to leave anything in there that could be random? And so when people will talk about tectonics, or they'll talk about volcanoes, and they'll say, well, why wouldn't the magma system be natural? I'm going, why in the world would you leave a volcanic system on that, to be natural? I go, you one super volcano and this whole thing is done. It is cooked. So everything would be part of it. Everything from the underwater conveyor system that controls the ocean currents, the jet stream, which controls the atmospheric stuff, and everything else in between. The magma system, the tectonic system, all, in my opinion, not only is it all necessary, but all works better in an enclosed system. It's way easier. Rob Skiba was the first one to show what like the weather systems. If you put it onto an azimuthal map, you change it into a flat map, it's just this beautiful circle with a few little swirls every once in a while, and it's just so much easier than all that crap that's supposedly going around the globe. It's a much more efficient system, and I'm not saying, I never ever would say that God was lazy in any way, shape, or form. What I'm saying is God is very, very efficient. I think Carl Sagan knew, and he kind of hinted at it. He's going, there's an awful waste of space that's out there. There's these huge tracts of space out in their solar system. There's nothing there, and galaxies. There's these massive. He goes, it's just amazing. It just seems like there should be more there. Well, what if it's the complete opposite? What if it's all right here? And as long as the population believes the illusion, why would you make a big solar system? He's like, well, God is infinite. God can make the solar system. Yeah, but he doesn't have to. Not if everyone buys it. If everyone buys it, then it becomes a much more interesting story. You can make it now. I do think at one point, 500 years ago, that whoever created this place helped the story along because it buys you time. Because eventually, people, I did a clue on this. If people find the edge, that's all. Again, it's what's going to happen. People find the edge. All anyone's going to care about is the edge. They will not care about anything else that's going on in the world. They're only going to care about the edge. The human beings do not like being confined. So what you do is you make it seem like there is no edge. How do you do that? You create a ball that you can circle all day long, and there's no fence. And that worked. It worked brilliantly.
Not only that, when you get to somewhere that seems like the edge will be, it's so cold and bitter.
Yeah.
Who wants to go over there, So.
The natural reinforcements, the natural negative reinforcements are brilliant. Oh, it is so brilliant. Little things like a 3% salt solution in the ocean, just enough to where human beings can't drink it, but other life forms can live in it. You get out to the outer edge, and icebergs start showing up. If you actually make it to the Antarctic coastline, it's 200 feet straight up of ice. If you can get on top of that thing, then you've got no plant life, no animal life. There's no supplies, and then it just starts going up and up and up and up, and it goes up to 2 miles, and it stays at 2 miles until you get to the higher mountains. You couldn't ask for a more inhospitable place. So that every time you think, so it's the most negative reinforcement. So what it does is it makes you, kind of like the Truman Show, it makes you change your mind. But you think it's your change. It's like, oh, it's too cold, I'm turning around. Oh, there's ice, I'm turning around. There's nothing to eat, I'm turning around. It's all your decision. You don't think that somebody's forcing you. Now, if there was a big, giant golden stop sign there that says, do not go any further, what do you think people would do? They would go, there'd be a whole church worship the golden stop sign. So.
Anytime you see deception in anything, it's a form of control, controlling people, and that's basically what that is. It's just controlling people, and it's interesting the lengths that powers that be will go to keep the people controlled. Yeah. And you're right. If somebody figured out, hey, there's an edge, it would be all about the edge.
Yeah,
because I'd want to.
And people will say, well, didn't ancient societies know? Didn't people know? And I said, yeah, you bet they knew. But until you have technology to exploit it, what are you going to do? You can't do anything. I joked that the King of France, let's say the King of France knew in 1400, right? He has a map and shows them the whole flat world. What's he going to do about it? Until the internal combustion engine gets invented, you don't even have planes. You just have wooden ships. You're not going anywhere. And that's what happened. I mean, literally, as soon as planes were invented, Byrd goes to the North Pole. Then he turns around and he goes to the South Pole. And then he spends 30 years in Antarctica looking for something. And looked like after 25 of those years, they just gave up. They said, well, apparently our maps, we couldn't find it. And then Murphy's Law, the second they do that, the very next mission, Operation Deep Freeze in 1955, the whole thing changes. And that was brilliant because, again, they gave it away because he's on television saying, this place is made out of money. And there's going to be people, everyone's going to be down there forever, for the next century. And then 2 years later, no one ever gets to go down there ever again. All the countries leave at the same time. All of them. Russia, they're rebuilding from the war. Britain, they're rebuilding from war. Argentina, Chile, Australia, New Zealand. All of them leave, sign a piece of paper. Yeah, we're never going back there. Nope, never. What is that? And nobody catches it. It's great. I love it. In fact, that worked for more than anything. As far as how the clues went, because you had the Admiral Byrd footage. The him on the television show. It's talking about it. Probably the United States' most respected explorer saying that turning to complete 180.
Yeah. So. No, there's no doubt about it. And what I keep asking myself, what would it take? What kind of evidence would it take for me to say, what, the Earth is flat or the Earth is a globe? Because to me, either one is hard to fathom. Obviously, it has to be probably one or the other. But when I look at the evidence for the globular side, all I can really have is the idea that I've always been taught this. Yeah. And then I can also certain kinds of mathematics, astronomy, and stuff like that. But then I look at the flat Earth side, the parts that we as normal humans can actually test, and it seems to be pointing to the flat Earth side of things. But I keep asking myself, what am I going to have to see for me to believe that the Earth is flat? Because I'm listening to all this, and this is it's really interesting to me, and I have this thought that it's like I really want to go check it out now myself, do whatever I can do, but what would I have to see to be like, this is
on the ground? That is a tall order. I had a debate with a scientist a couple months ago now, Brian Dunning, I believe. And he surprised me because I came at him and I said, look, if you had to take the average man on the street from a scientist's point of view and you had to prove the curve, how would you do it? And he paused, and I thought he would knee-jerk reaction to that thing, and he didn't. And he goes, you know what? He goes, I couldn't do it. He goes, you can't prove it on the ground. From a scientific standpoint, you cannot prove the curve on the ground. He goes, I'd have to give you $20 million, and you'd have to go up to space. And then I realized, and it kept circling back to the same thing. The gatekeepers are already up there, and the gatekeepers of the United States military. Now, yes, you can say there's other space agencies, but the United States military was the one that started this thing.
Well, I mean, there's private organizations that have had it, but they keep getting bought out by the government organizations. I know there was one recently where Obama decided he wasn't going to fund NASA. A private organization stepped up, and then they ended up getting bought by NASA somehow. So
there you go. Yeah, they don't want private corporations could have been involved since day one because they were supplying the parts. General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, those guys, those are big players, big military contracts. But to your question, at least I can only speak from my standpoint because I've been talking to all these guys. For me, the brass ring is someone from the space program whistleblowing. That's really the big one because you can on the ground. It shouldn't be, and there's no play on words here, both sides shouldn't be level. It should be a slam dunk for the globe side, which is why the globe is having such a hard time because it's like, look, the mountain of evidence should be here against a flat earth, but it's not. They're both going head to head, and that should not be possible. Until somebody from the space program, either retired or current, someone comes in and says, there's a lie, or, they make some public announcement. I'm not necessarily expecting Neil deGrasse Tyson to come out and say that, although he did surprise us just last week when he said that, when he was arguing with a physicist during a conference saying that not only is a virtual reality possible, it's probable. And he was like the only guy on the panel to say this. I was going, wait, you were the same guy that dropped the mic on national television and said the Earth isn't effing flat, but it's virtual? How do you do both of those things? That really bothered me. So it makes me think that they're still waiting for disclosure, and they're going to try to control it at some point.
I want to tell people real quick. There's a lot of people in here that may want to ask questions. Go to the link in the bottom of the description. Go there to the chat room. Ask some questions to people, or ask some questions to us. We'll relay them, and there might actually be some questions in the chat room right now. John, do you notice any, or? I haven't looked at it in a while.
Throw them at me. Your mic's off.
Mic's off, John. Mic's muted, brother. See you trying. There we go.
Oh, it's a rookie mistake. You hate to see it.
Hey, I'm a guy in training. He's brought me on board. And he's training me up. So.
No, I have to say that because I actually talked, because I do my own show on Tuesdays, and I actually talked for 11 minutes. And I didn't read my emails, and so I realized that I was muted the entire time. I was like, oh, really?
That's hilarious. I'm looking at this video here in the chat room right now. Somebody sent this.
Yeah, there's a tough question in there for you, Mark. What's your view on Jesus Christ doing flat Earth? I don't know where that came from, but that seems like a tough question. It seems like Rob Skiba, one of your peer, he has a tough time with that issue, with people saying, "Well, how's this going to help people?"
Like if I had a flat Earth T-shirt with a flat Earth on one side and the back, it said, "What would Jesus think?"
Exactly.
One of those deals.
Exactly.
I think that his role really doesn't change much in this, with the exception of, you know what? I will go back, because actually I'm surprised that Rob didn't say this. There was I don't remember the chapter and verse, someone will have to look it up for me, where during the second coming, and I was bothered by this in Sunday school when I was a kid, which was when during the second coming, that's Brian Mullen, Balls Out Physics, great guy. During the second coming, everyone will be able to see the second coming at the same time. And on a ball, on a spherical object, that is really, really tough. So how do you pull that off? Well, if it's a flat surface, then yeah, it's very easy to do. It's extremely easy. You just show up and everyone can see you. And there's been stories in other mythologies for years. In fact, I think there's one, I don't know if it's Old Testament or if it's another religion, where there was a tree in the center of the earth and it grew so high it could be seen from all corners of the earth. But anyway, if you're talking specifically Jesus, that's the only reference I really have. Well, except for the time that I know more about the Bible than I thought. where Jesus was taken up onto the highest of all mountains with Satan, and Satan showed him the breadth of the world from a single peak.
Exactly.
And so I think Jesus knows it's a flat Earth? Yes, I do. And I think he'd wear the T-shirt.
I think it's interesting when people are like, what does flat Earth have to do with winning people to Christ? It's like, well, what does football have to do with winning people to Christ? What does taking your kid to the zoo, or what does playing basketball have to do with
Well, I think it's direct, though. And I know there are pastors that have actually given me grief and said, look, we don't want this to distract from the message, which is God. And I was going, this is bringing people to God. Because if you're giving them a hint, it's like, look, if there's proof, which is why I delayed it as long as I could, but when I made a clue that was called Hiding God, and somebody actually turned it into a full-blown documentary, it's out there on YouTube, called They Were Hiding God with the Greatest Lie Ever. That's my stuff, but it's not even my channel. But I said, look, if there is proof of intelligent design, if there is proof of God, that's what you want. It's what everyone's been wanting for the longest time. What do you think? Everybody, whether you're a devout religious person or not, everybody at some point gets in their hands and knees. Maybe not their own bed, but they say, look, give me a sign, show me you're out there, show me proof. If this is it, it's the greatest thing ever. It changes civilization overnight.
We're really living in an enclosed system. There's no way to doubt the existence of intelligent design, whether or not they want to believe it's, Yahweh of the Bible or whatever. It doesn't, either way, there's no way to deny the existence of an intelligent design there. I mean, because it's one thing to think that our planet's spinning hundreds of miles and thousands of miles an hour, galaxies. I mean, then it's easy to almost think, sure, it could be chance, I guess, of given billions of years or whatever. But if we're living in an enclosed terrarium, you can't think that way. I mean, it's just impossible.
Yeah, and there's no way. You can't. Yeah, it is. I've said that it is really tough to be an atheist if this thing actually happens, because you're going to be really, really stuck. But I also want to throw in the whole line again. Not going to get chapter and verse, which is the great deception, the one that fools even the elect. If this isn't a likely candidate for that, I don't know what is. A trick so good that everybody falls for it. To me, it is either that, or of course, you combine this with what we all know, the false second coming. Which it's funny, because I used to think, well, if somebody actually showed up and said they were Christ, who's going to believe him, right? Well, if a spaceship lands right now because someone came out and said, I built this, and they could say just about anything they wanted, and people would buy it, and because the media is going to cover it. Anyway, sorry, go on.
No, I see Rob hassle with a lot of people on his Facebook page when he puts something out, and he had mentioned something about Yeshua landing on the Mount of Olives and everything splitting, but everybody seeing him land on the Mount of Olives, and people were throwing out chapters and verses at him, and he says, look, there's going to be so much mayhem and destruction before that happens that nobody can use their cell phone, nobody can use their cameras. I mean, it's just going to be everything's going to be knocked out. So it's got to be, well, he said it has to be on a flat earth for everybody to see him come down.
Yeah.
So
I didn't cover that in the clues, but the two that really stuck out at me, both were from Sunday school days. One was the whole Joshua story. Hopefully I got the name right. Where Joshua asked God to hold the sun in the sky for an extra day so he could slay more enemies.
That was Joshua.
And I thought, when you're younger, it's like, how do you pull that off? You got to stop the whole solar system, and you got to stop the Earth rotating and everything. You got to stop everything. You don't stop just the Earth. You stop everything. But then in an enclosed system, it's like, oh, that isn't hard at all.
Well, think about it. The sun stopped. It was the sun that stopped, not the Earth, but it was just the sun.
Just the sun.
And when I first heard that from you guys, it was coming out, and I was like, I've never read it that way.
Yeah.
It was the sun. He stopped the sun, not the Earth, from spinning.
Yeah, I didn't read that way either. And then the one that was more prominent to me, which I had fun with, even though I never said it by name, I just wanted people to guess, was the Tower of Babel, which was, the Tower of Babel that's going to reach heaven. And I'm going, wait, where's that tower going exactly? If the Earth is spinning on its axis and it's also moving through space, you're not going anywhere. You think you finally get to a certain point, and then it's going to line up. But if it's an enclosed system, you know exactly where you're going. You have a goal in mind.
John, you mentioned.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. John, you mentioned something about Dr. Michael Lake and the Tower of Babel since he brought it up. Is it the area that he was talking about?
Yeah, he believes that there's certain areas, like the land of Shinar, where they believed, the people that built these towers and these places, and even the pyramid areas, they believed that there was weak spots in what he called the I guess the interdimensional portals or whatever. And I guess if you believe flat Earth, you could think of it as a weak spot in the actual firmament itself, and possibly depending on the interdimensional side of this, of what's going on. I don't, it's hard for me to say, but I thought that was pretty interesting to think about it that way, because if there were actually trying to build something to a spot where they thought was a weak spot in the firmament, and because the whole goal, if you read the Book of Jasher and other extra biblical books, was for them to storm the throne room of God, get into that certain part of heaven to storm his throne room.
They would have to get past that dome.
And by the way, why also was interesting was, in the whole Babel thing, I want to bring up a Jasher thing real quick too. But when you're building the tower, you read in the thing where God says they're going to make it. That was the summary. It's like, they're going to make it, and I'm going to put a stop to this like right now. It wasn't like they were just building a tower just going nowhere. He's going, oh yeah, these guys are totally going to get this thing done, and we just cannot have that. Let's do the whole language thing, crumble, and do that. The other thing was an interesting, at the end of Jasher, and I didn't know much about Jasher, and I still don't really know that about Jasher, when chapter 3, when Enoch is leaving, right, at the very last part of chapter 3 in Jasher, he's, he is, of course, no one wants Enoch to leave, so there's all these people following him, but they couldn't follow him because he walked off the edge of the earth. And we got to that edge. They were really good about saying they got to this point where there was ice and snow and more snow, and they couldn't pass. He kept going, and they had to stop because it was too bad. I was going, in most biblical stuff, you don't hear about a lot of snowy places. It's always desert and palm trees and dates and stuff like that. You don't get a lot of snow references.
Well, they date the book of Enoch 400 years before Yeshua walked the earth, or whoever wrote it, during that time. But it's at the same time, how did they know about the cold, the ice in the north, the cold, the ice in the south? I mean, this person was writing this, in a very hot place. So how did he know about this?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just the knowledge. You were talking about the Tower of Babel, but you had mentioned CERN earlier. Yeah. So what's the connection between CERN and the flat Earth?
CERN, I think... Well, I don't know if I want to get too much into it, but if this is a jailbreak scenario, if this place is not just enclosed, but it was also enclosed to hold something in, or some beings in, because people have said, well, if we're not the first people, and it's obvious we are not the first civilization to be here by any question, because there have been disasters that have wiped out other civilizations, not just the Great Flood, but look at the sunken cities off of Japan and off of India. Not to mention, I've been to the pyramids. I have no idea how old they are, but they were not built by us. Or anyone even close to us. But if it's a jailbreak scenario, that means that people said, well, who was the first people to be here? Who were the first residents? And was going, it might be a little creepy to say, but, could the first residents have been the fallen? In which case, then it gets kind of interesting, because this place could turn into sort of a novelty scenario where, because it's obvious the fallen aren't walking amongst us necessarily, so maybe you could use every civilization and see if they could look at a problem with a new set of eyes. Maybe the fallen couldn't get out, but maybe every civilization has their own problem-solving abilities. It's like, oh, what you got? Oh, we got atomic weapons. It's okay, it's not doing anything. What else you got? A harp, that's not bad. What else you working on? Ooh, that CERN thing, that looks pretty interesting. As our civilization, but there's a time limit, I think. I think you can only allow civilization to get so far, and then Act 3 happens, and then the whole thing we get back to whatever happens when the transition happens.
Well, there's a lot of connection between the esoteric CERN and the story of Tower of Babel, and we talk about the different levels of heaven within the Scripture. Mm-hmm. And my son asked me today, because he lives on Rob's page on the Flat Earth. I mean, he's digging everything that he's doing. He watches your videos, and I watch them with you.
Cool.
His question today was, he's 16. He wanted to know, what do you think is above the dome?
I believe, it's not the first time I've been asked this, but I've been thinking about this for a number of years, way before Flat Earth, which is, I believe it's an unlimited universe. If you want to know kind of a graphical description, take a look at everyone's seen it, the Flammarion, Flammirion. It was designed in 1888. It's a woodcut where the story goes that the Catholic Church had sent out monks. They had heard the story that there were the corners of the earth, and they said, find the edge and see what's beyond it. And there's this little scene where a monk is looking underneath from our world, which is this planetarium, into this dimension. And if you can, in fact, you can see Ezekiel's wheel outside, and it's all these, it's wonderful cascading layers of different universes. I think it's an unlimited universe outside of this, meaning because everything in here is built on so many layers of conflict. It's almost inescapable conflict. No matter how rich you are, how powerful, how beautiful, you run into layers of misery and suffering to a certain degree. There's always something going on. And even if you had it all perfect, let's say you're the most wonderful athlete, model, rock star, politician, and you were a saint on top of it, all these things, you're still going to have to deal with mortality and your own health. So what's outside of here? There's different, of course, every religion's got their different names for heaven, Shambhala, Nirvana, take your pick. But I think it is the opposite of here. I think it is an unlimited universe where and part of the reason we're here is because you can't, I don't want to dig into it too much because then I'm talking, playing with the whole idea of what God's doing, but I don't think you can appreciate what that is until you come here. Because, sorry.
Well, it sounds like it's deepening your faith, your personal faith.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It has. My spirituality was waning, to say the least. And when I got into this thing, it was an immediate snap because it was like, okay, there's a creator. Now I had kind of thought that anyway. A while back when I was kind of delving into static world theory about why this world was built, but I will never do, and I wasn't kidding because I'm trying to be an optimist about this. If people find out, they're gonna do the right thing, because the astronauts, they wouldn't lie on camera, or they wouldn't lie under oath because I think they were afraid. I won't do anything malicious to anyone ever again, ever. Because I believe there's a scorecard on our lives, and we have been watched since day one. And I think the rules also change once you know, then you have no excuse. It's like, well, you knew, but you robbed the bank anyway. It's like, I didn't really know. You knew, but up until that, I think they give you some leeway. If you don't know much about spirituality and right and wrong and good and bad, and you get a pass. Kind of, but once you know, oh yeah, there's nothing, you couldn't make me do it now, because it's the argument I give to people is, and you can watch The Clue to watch the astronauts who don't lie under oath. But the argument is, okay, so everyone's run a stop sign in their life, everyone's done that, right? But as soon as they put a camera on that intersection, you don't run it anymore. Why not? Well, I'll get caught because they're going to take my picture. I'm going, then why were you thinking about doing it in the first place? You're only doing the right thing because you had to.
There's no doubt about that. When if you can think you're being watched, which I tend to think that anyway, being a believer. But as a flat Earth, there's no doubt. One thing about CERN, we were talking about CERN, that is interesting to me. I was, going off this whole idea of the weak spots or whatever. Where CERN is built, location is where they believe the temple to Apollo was built. And if it, obviously in Revelation chapter 9, it talks about he gave the angel the key to the bottomless pit, and whose name is Abaddon, with in the Greek tongue that's Apollyon, which that's where that. It's really interesting, man. I wonder if this geographical location, I was looking it up on maps just a second ago just to kind of see where it was at, and I would like to see what the parallel it is on, but that is an interesting thought to think about, something to research anyway.
Yeah, agreed.
So that wasn't really a question, I guess it was more of a
That's okay. That's all right.
But I think we do have some more questions on here. I'm not sure. There was one about...
Yeah, there's a few.
Go ahead, man. I haven't been keeping up with it.
This one's from Justin. He says, best new flat earth idea, in my opinion, is digging into China. Ask Mark if he has ever thought about that. If you think about at the very center of the earth, earth up and down would flip. So I'm not familiar with the question. He says, best new flat earth idea.
I know what he's saying. The old theory which kids used to think about is if there was a hole that went through, and actually they did this in a movie, and I can't remember what movie it was, where they had a tram that went from one end of the planet to the other, and theoretically speaking, if the world was a sphere and if you believed in modern astrophysics, your gravity would get less and less and less. You would weigh less and less until you got to the core of the Earth, which you would weigh nothing, and then you would, as you went through, you would gain more and more weight as you came out the other side. But for me, it's all a moot point, which is actually good that you brought this up, because I actually did a part of a clue on it, which was something that always bothered me. In mainstream science, they'll say that the Earth is 8,000 miles wide, roughly, right? We'll just round it up a little bit to 8,000 miles wide, which means it's 4,000 miles to the center. And you see these cross sections. You see you see it goes from red to orange to yellow to white. This blinding white milky center. And I'm going, oh wow, that's really great. So you got a probe down that far. You got a probe down 4,000 miles. No, 2,000. 1,000, 100, 10. Do you even do 10 miles? No. The deepest hole ever drilled by any corporation has been 8 miles. So if you've only drilled down 8 miles, which is just a fraction of 1% of the distance just to get to to the center, forget about going all the way, what exactly is that cross section you're showing us? And they'll now science will back up a little bit and they'll say, well, we're extrapolating from volcanic things we see here and there, rock formations and seismic radar that we're bouncing in. We're knocking on it. We're pretty sure we know what's down there. I go, yeah, but you don't know. So why? And here's where science runs into the same thing. They fall in the same traps as religion does sometimes, which is, why don't you just, instead of show us a cross-section, why don't you show us a globe with a big question mark on the inside of it? Because you don't know. Because science doesn't like doing that, because people hate question marks. And so science just takes a liberty, and they say, well, that's pretty much what we're sure. But then they go off the reservation, they go even further as well, and then they'll give us cross-sections of Venus and Mars and Neptune and Jupiter. Wait, how in the world did you pull that off? So anyway, the answer to his question is it's a moot point. Digging to China, you can't even start to dig it. The irony is you can't even start to dig it to China. Once you get 8 miles down, the drill bits stop. The Russians tried it. The Germans tried it. Years. We're not talking short operations. We're talking they got down to 8 miles, and they were stuck at 8 miles, and they just couldn't do it. 5, 10 years. Could not get it going. So it's just one of those. Sorry, it's one of those things I rant. I'm not saying that all science is bad by any stretch. I'm not saying this should turn into a war between religion and science. Science has given us things like light bulbs and air conditioning and smartphones, for better or for worse with the smartphones. But they've given us so many things that have not helped us. Everything from lead paint to DDT to asbestos to, not to mention all the military projects that have been going on for all these times. I mean, I could go on and on. So science took over 500 years ago and just been gaining steam, and now they appear at one point, not that long ago, had a stranglehold, but that stranglehold seems to be dissolving very, very quickly, and which is also why they're going to fight this tooth and nail, because scientists all over the world are going to be in real trouble, because people are going to say, okay, you were wrong about this, what else you're wrong about? Then they'll turn to the scriptures and they'll say, that actually was right. What else is that right about? And then the whole paradigm changes. Sorry, that was my rant.
No, sorry, man. I was looking at this video. This guy had made. I guess he said he made it. I don't know, but anyway, yeah, it's interesting, man, to say the least. Now, I want to wrap this show up here. Sure. We're an hour and a half in. We wanted to go an hour, but this is a subject.
Oh, that's cool. No, I knew you couldn't do it in an hour.
We could probably go for a lot longer.
We go a long time on this.
We sure can. I'd love to have you back to discuss a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, if your viewers will allow it, I know people. You got to remember, there's a backlash, and I know people, because this isn't your first show on this, right?
No, we had Rob on before, and I don't care, man, because to be perfectly. Like I gave that disclaimer at the beginning. We have people on to give their insight on things. We are questioners of everything, and that's what we pride ourselves on being people that are actually question things. And people that don't want to question the subject, whatever, don't question it. But
let me throw this out real quick for the listeners out there, because you were saying, how would you prove something? Let me throw it right back at them, and because this is something that we've been doing now for months, which is, anyone that can show me where the curve is, show it to me. I mean, you think people say, oh, no, I've seen an airplane. And I put this out 15 months ago. I said, you see an airplane? Fine. Take a picture of it, put it on your laptop, hold a straight edge up to it. If the curve's still there, you send me a picture of it. I will put it on air. I will put it on my show. No one's ever done it. show me the curve somewhere. That's the easiest one to go after. It should be 8 inches per mile squared.
Yeah.
It's not there. So, again, prove me wrong. Anyone that's out there, I know there's people saying flat Earth is dumb, it's stupid. I'm going, fine, prove me wrong.
If there's somebody out there that thinks that they know all the answers to these questions, I'll be happy to host a debate if somebody out there knows what they're talking about and wants to actually do it. But the problem is I'm not hearing from the other side very much. So I'm hearing from the flat Earth side, and I'm hearing a lot of things that are super interesting. So we decide we're going to do it. I know a lot of my viewers are, like, why are you guys getting on this stuff? But honestly, we're here to question things. We're here to learn, and unless you can hear this side and that side, unless you can hear because anybody, I talked about this before, anybody can make something sound legitimate if they want to. All they have to do is put together a well-formed thesis, put together the facts that they want, and leave out all the facts opposing it. But in order to really prove your point or test your point, there has to be an antithesis. There has to be somebody that can test what you're saying. Yeah. And how do you do that? You have shows that are different about different things. You talk about these things, and that's the way, and they're like, oh, debates. Like, I like debates personally because they help me learn. The Bible, in Acts, they had a debate. There was a debate with Peter, Paul, and all those, and Barnabas. They debated certain things, and they came to a conclusion on it. The problem is people won't ever, like most people that debate or argue, they do not care what the other person has to say. They're waiting for their turn to talk. And here, that's not what we're here for. We're here to learn because I want to know. I want to know about these things. I'm not going to, like I've said so many times, I'm right about this. 4 years later, I was wrong. How many times am I going to have to say that before I start learning that, what? I'm going to research, and I'm going to keep researching until I figure out the truth. I'm not just going to go ahead and say somebody's wrong right off the bat without ever testing it. That's foolish. The Bible talks about that, hearing only one side and then not hearing the other and making up your mind makes a fool out of you. And so I'm not going to do that. That's not what we're about here. And if this kind of stuff, you can't handle people talking about this kind of thing, then we might not be the channel for you, or you might just have to mute this video and watch the next one because we talk about a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Exactly. The ultimate ignorance is the rejection of something you know nothing about, yet refuse to investigate it. Where can people find your information if they want to go get into? Because you do put out some serious research. I mean, most of it's very serious. I mean, you do your homework. Where can they find your information?
Okay, 2 easy ways to find it. Let's just do the YouTube one because everybody knows YouTube. If you're on YouTube, just type in 3 words: Flat Earth Clues. Those 3 words, you will find my stuff. My YouTube channel is just my name, Mark K. Sargent. You don't have to remember that. Flat Earth Clues, easy to remember. If you want just a dedicated website on it, which mirrors a lot of the stuff from YouTube, that's enclosedworld.com. It's still pretty cool. There are apps out there, Flat Earth Clues apps. There's a book on Amazon now called Flat Earth Clues, which I didn't even have to solicit. That shows you how weird it's getting. And that's the easiest way to get all this stuff. Oh, and I do a show on Tuesday nights. I do a radio show called on Truth Frequency Network Radio called Strange World, and I do another show with Patricia Steer called Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes. That's on YouTube. There's all sorts of stuff. So it's not tough to find.
That's fun to listen to you guys on that show.
Oh, thank you.
Well, we have a lot of fun. I'll put your links in the description too, so people can go check it out. But we definitely appreciate you coming, and I want to tell our guests as well. Thank you for those of you that joined the chat. For those of you that like to know more about the shows we do, or just get a reminder when we do them, make sure you sign the. If you go to the page that's in the description, or underneath it, you can sign up for the newsletter, and we just send out a reminder right before the show, and sometimes just about new information we got. But then we don't spam people by any means. If we have a live show, we post it out there, and you guys can come. And I know a lot of the listeners that rely on that newsletter so they can figure out what's going on. So make sure you guys sign up for that. That way you'll never miss a show. I always have people, man, I missed the show. How can I, figure it out? That's the way you can figure it out. You just go and you sign up for it. We boost it out. I want to thank Mark so much for coming on, man. It was an awesome show. It was really informative, and man, it takes me one step closer towards that. Mark, I'm going to have to go out. Me and Rob had talked about getting a boat and going to the Chicago area and actually keeping the camcorder on it the whole entire time so people can't say it's a mirage, because if it's a mirage, the closer you get, it's going to disappear. So we're going to, try to do that, probably John too, and we'll document it and just check out some stuff for ourselves that we can check out. There's stuff you can do out there in the audience to check it out for yourself. None of these tests are too difficult. I mean, unless you got some kind of jet you want to let us borrow, and we can fly up in the air, see how high we can get.
Nice.
We'll do that too if you want to. If you guys have anything like that, so you never know who might be listening. So maybe you never know.
I know in our household it was a hot topic. We were talking to Mark Sargent today. I know we were geeking out almost all day over it. So it's really good to have you on the show.
Thanks, man. Thank you very
Really
much.
cool.
It was a joy to be here. You guys were great.
All right. Well, blessings, everybody, and until next time, we will be praying for you. And thank you so much. We love you guys. You guys are like the family, like our family. Everybody listens to the show, and we appreciate all your comments, your messages, and we can't wait till next time.
Read your scripture.
Oh, do I have a closing remark?